Hi everyone, I'm Chandler Ferrebee, the program manager for the Virginia Film Festival. Thank you so much for joining us for a conversation with Nicole Kassell on HBO's Watchmen. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah,
Um, congratulations on all the success of this show. It is so well deserved. It is
thank you.
an incredible work of art, truly. How did you come on to Watchmen?
I had worked with Damon Lindelof on The Leftovers. I did 2 episodes over 2 seasons, and we connected then. I loved his writing, and when Leftovers ended, I just knew he was going to be doing Watchmen. We'd never talked about it. We'd never talked about comic or anything. And I'm not a fangirl. I didn't grow up on that, but I wanted to do whatever he was doing next. So around the time I knew he was getting ready to start showing the pilot script to find a director, I sent a note. I sent an email just saying, I want to be considered. I want to put my hat in the ring. And he was like, cool. So um, so I believe he met with maybe 4 or 5 different directors, and we spoke on the phone. He told me what he was doing, and then I read the script, and it just blew me away. And I did a real, very classic pitch for it. I put together a lookbook with images and a story of why I felt so passionate about it, why I wanted to do it, and um, and then what it would look like. Because really, at that point, it's subjective. The director's eye is subjective. It's not a wrong choice, it's just a choice to make. But I put my heart and soul into it. I felt really, really the importance of it, and that it would give me this. It was everything I looked for in what I do. Just, incredible story, incredible visual playground, and really saying something important that would leave people with something to think about.
Yeah, and I know you hadn't read the graphic novel prior to reading the pilot, right?
Correct.
Um, had you read it by the time you made the lookbook and that sort of thing? No.
No,
Oh, that's so interesting.
I, yeah, so I read the script and I was just really honest because, at a certain point I was like, oh gosh, should I cram the book and then talk to him? And I was like, no, I'm going to be, what I bring to this is actually that objectivity because he had read it. It's in Damon's DNA. Let me be the side of the audience that's coming to this with fresh eyes. So I definitely cracked it open, and I just looking at it noticed immediately the vertical format of the panels, which is rather unconventional, I think, in comic world. It's not, again, I haven't read a lot of comics, but I usually expect a horizontal panel. So that I definitely incorporated that idea into the lookbook in the sense of, looking for frames within frames to kind of find. It was the vertical format, really elongated characters, and the use of shadow um, made a very strong impression. Also, the color palette is unlike anything I'd seen. So I did glimpse at it, but only once I got the job did I then do the deep dive on reading the book and watching all the motion graphic um, videos that are available on YouTube. They're incredible. I recommend to anybody watching those. I loved them. Um, so that's the story.
Yeah, was that I know it's a big part, like it's really important to Damon. I know I read it for the first time when I was 15. And what did it help you to not consider it this sacred text that so many people look at it as?
I mean, I immediately understood it was to so many people. So I definitely felt that pressure, but you have to just immediately like put that on the back burner, but because I knew there was such a fervent, fan base, that is why I studied it so deeply and really wanted to pay honor to it, an homage to it, visually beyond the story as often as I could, just to really say to the fans, we we love you, we appreciate you, and we know we're taking a swing at your favorite book ever. So let us give you some presents along the way.
It's great. And was it, I mean, the pilot is kind of insane. There's a silent film, there's a musical, there's a TV show within a TV show, there's multiple battles. Was that daunting at all?
It was. I love that you call it insane, because that's what drew me to it.
Yeah.
It's wild and wacky. Um, it wasn't daunting. It felt immense. It felt huge, but not daunting, because I knew HBO was going to give me what I needed to do it. And um, I guess the only thing maybe daunting was, I mean, of course, the most daunting thing was 1921, doing the massacre of Tulsa, and that's because it was a true story. And to try and do something so big and so loaded, in just 2 days. I was hoping to have 3 days. I got actually 1.5 days plus half a day for the garage. So daunting was doing that in that time frame. But the other things, it was just a matter of preparing for, and I was given the time, and the team I wanted to approach it. So it's a yes and no. Of course, it felt daunting at times, and the weight of carrying a pilot of this scale, is pressure filled. And what else? But the most foreign territory for me was visual effects. I'd done very kind of typical visual effects stuff of using green screens or this and that, but this actually, there was a lot of visual effects on a scale I'd never done before. So it was a steep learning curve, but again, just had incredible department heads surrounding me to make us all do our best.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. I mean, there's insane props in this, all of the owl ship and the goggles and the museum to Tulsa and the squids. Thanks to everyone involved on Watchmen for finally giving us our squids.
Yeah.
How was it creating those with the digital effects and also working with the various production departments?
It was really fun, and it was it was a huge collaborative process. I would work with Christian, who was our production designer, Mike Sabo was our props. We would all come up with ideas. We'd feed them to Damon, and it's all about taking risks and being in a safe spot to, like, either have it loved or not, and no ego when it wasn't landing right. It was only pushing us to make it better, or and again, it all comes down to taste. So but it was, I mean, super fun to get to world build. And I'd say now, as I look to future things, I realize, like, I'm kind of hooked on that. A story that's grounded in realism is, it's exciting to tell very important stories, but my job then is to recreate reality rather than getting to create a new one too. So it was an added challenge, but super, super fun.
Yeah, and were the squids real? They look very real when they're raining down.
Here, I'll show you something.
Oh my gosh.
So this is a mold
Oh, that's so crazy.
of, so we made real little pink versions of this. But we were actually filming on an overpass. So we quickly realized, through tests and such, it was not going to be safe to kind of air blast these to fall, because they could bounce onto traffic going under the.
Right.
So what you see on screen is entirely visual effects, and we ended up using the little pink guys we made as kind of stand-ins for framing and such.
Right.
But when production was over, I asked the amazing special effects house to cast like a dozen of these
So
for
cool.
gifts. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Hmm.
Um, and kind of back to the Tulsa massacre scene. That was obviously a big undertaking. Technically, was it difficult emotionally for yourself and the actors to portray this horrible, horrible moment in history?
Absolutely. Um, it was absolutely. And but the way I dealt with that was on the days of actual filming, I had to just shut off that feeling, and just be very factual about, or clinical, this is what I want here, this is what I want there. And, every once in a while I'd see something and it would punch me in the gut, but I couldn't go there because then I would never make it through
Yeah.
the whole thing. And it really was, it's like this past spring, I watched that opening in preparation for a panel. And that's when I just finally cracked. I was like, and especially in light of what's going on right now, it's so visceral. And so, it's still happening. So um, it was extremely difficult, but we really prepared so thoroughly to make sure to take care of everyone from the crew to the cast, that the ultimate kind of sign to me is like during production, in between takes, I have some pictures of the background actors like sitting on a bench laughing. And one of them, while during action, had just been throwing the other over the bench. And it was just like, that's what mattered most to me, was making sure we were taking care of everyone. And I think we really succeeded in that.
Yeah, and I'm not alone in I had never heard of the Tulsa massacre before Watchmen. That's
Right.
I find that to be pretty common. How does it feel to create this piece of pop culture that also has acted as education in a lot of ways?
It's rewarding, but it's like, I'm not proud of that because it's an unfortunate position to be in. It doesn't feel, I was as appalled as and shocked as everyone that I learned about it through a screenplay.
Mhm.
And 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 I knew like the night the pilot aired, learning that there were like 500,000 hits just that night, on the internet, checking was that real? And and that left me like, even if the rest of the show had tanked and just fallen off the rails, having brought awareness to the event would have been a reward in
Mhm.
and of itself. So I am proud, but again, I don't take credit for that in any way. I don't know what the correct word for it is, but it reading that screenplay was a light bulb for me, and I'm glad that we could send that light out, wide.
Yeah. And when Trump decided that his first rally would be in Tulsa, did that I mean that must have been a really weird day for you.
It was really, I mean, so many things were weird through that. That was, I mean, it was horrific. It was horrific, but we also all felt, it really felt, it's Kamala Harris actually, even before she was VP candidate, her tweet that day was the one that really stood out to me, of like, this isn't a wink and a nod to white supremacy. It's a welcome home party. And, it's just every time I think he can't do something more base, he does. And it was really nauseating because, we're talking about at least hundreds of people murdered in cold blood by their neighbors and employers for no reason, in their own country. It wasn't even an immigration war. It was nothing. So that was truly appalling.
Yeah. No, and that kind of brings me to the Seventh Cavalry, and which for viewers at home, it's a white supremacist group on the show that is inspired by Rorschach from the original graphic novel. You said that you were you're from Charlottesville, and you said you were really inspired by might be the wrong word, by what happened here to bring that to Watchmen. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I think after the election and then after Charlottesville happened, I was definitely sitting on this sense of political rage and helplessness. And, I'm not a daily activist. I have a, I'm a filmmaker. And when I read the script, I just felt like this gift of like, this is where I can put all of that energy. The Charlottesville events were so painful because it ripped that band-aid off of obviously what's always been there. It's always important for me to remember Black people aren't shocked by any of these events, so it's this, you know, this waking up going on. But, I was appalled by Charlottesville um, um, and heartbroken. So, I just felt that was just part of my personal connection to it.
Mhm. Um, and also another thing that's kind of echoing in our society is this use of masks, especially on the police officers. You said in an interview that they explore the complexity of who you are when you're wearing a mask and who you are when you aren't wearing a mask. And what of that do you see in our situation now that we are all kind of wearing masks?
Yeah. I remember the first week masking kind of was, uh, I don't know if it was required or highly suggested here. I'm in New York. And we went out, I went out with my son, and who's, tall. He's 15. He looks like a man. And he had a mask on. He's also half Asian, half Chinese, so he looks Asian. And a white man passed us and called my son an asshole. And he was also wearing a mask. And it was just this feeling like masks make people cruel. That's the line from the show. And as we started wearing them, I found it so hard to connect with people. And it does conceal your identity. It truly does. And it doesn't necessarily bring the best out in you. Um, and, in Watchmen, Angela Abar, when she's not Sister Night, is still, when we go to that classroom and first meet her, she's putting on a performance as mom. It's like, I think a lot of us, and I'd say, Tim Blake Nelson's character, Looking Glass, he is almost more himself when he's wearing his mask than when he's not. In our show, it was allowing us to explore, you know, what are you hiding with or without a literal mask? With what's going on now, it's just bonkers. It's um, the way that that masks have become a political statement is just infuriating.
Yeah,
you
that
know,
first scene where he pulls the guy in the truck over and he says, "Can I take a look in your car?" And he says, "Well, can I see your face?" That felt just so real.
hmm
It's insane. Yeah. Um Speaking of the incredible actors that you get to work with in this show, were you a part of that casting process at all? And what was it like working with them?
I was definitely a part of the casting process, and it's a joyful part of the process. The big name actors, you're offering them versus having them audition. But Amy was divine, just Regina King. I'll go anywhere in the world for her on or off screen. Um, Tim, Jeremy Irons, just all so inspiring. All of them, Gene, Don Johnson, like to have actors, like on the pilot alone, I had the 6-year-old boy, his parents, like the range in ages. I think our cast was everywhere from 0 to Lou Gossett Jr., who's in his early 80s.
Mhm.
And it was just exquisite to get to play with such an incredible range of people, and approaches to performance. And it was very hard to say goodbye.
Yeah. And how, especially with Regina King, how involved was she with kind of creating the character of Angela Abar?
Very. I mean, all of them. That's the scripts were extraordinary, but every one of them, of the actors, gets inside the character, in a way that no one else can, and they, just through their process of finding them through costume choices and hair choices. And, it's a conversation between the director and, writer Damon and me on the pilot. But, um, everybody kind of, it's amazing how much you find through those choices. And then you see the actors like literally putting on that skin. And then everybody has a different process to performance, but lots of conversations and rehearsal when needed. And, with Regina, we, had her chemistry read for who would play Cal. So a real investment and we rehearsed with the kids so that there could be kind of the beginnings of a family connection. And I'd say the person I worked probably most truly in depth with was with Yaya, because for playing the Dr. Manhattan, that was the original, not Yaya. I mean, sorry, not Calhan, we had to really work to find who that was and his voice. And, because we weren't sure if we could do it with the same actor, but we really, really wanted to, without giving it away. And that took some real time because he had to really truly change the tenor of his voice. Um, and it took time to find out what that voice would be and then to practice it because it took physical effort for.
Yeah, in A God Walks into Abar is actually, that's my favorite episode of the series for
Oh,
sure. I love it. When did Yaya, I know he didn't know when he signed on. When did he find out he was the Dr. Manhattan?
he found out before production began on episode 2.
Okay.
Yeah, so he found out during the break. And but Regina didn't know for a little while longer. And then no one else knew. It was an incredible secret to keep. We kept it secret, I guess, all the way up to the camera tests. Um, but I never even told my family, until they saw it on screen.
That's
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he gave a wonderful speech at the Emmys. And
Mm.
he said, but in the midst of all that, it was also a story about a God who came down to earth to reciprocate to a Black woman all the love that she deserves. He'd offer her sacrifice and support, passion, protection, and he did all of this in the body of a Black man. How much of that was part of the conversation you were building around Dr. Manhattan during it?
It wasn't,
Oh,
that's what it was. So, Damon and I spoke after the ceremony, and he brought that up, that like we're still learning from the show. It was obviously huge choices in casting, very, very conscious, deliberate reasons for why Dr. Manhattan would be, why Regina, why Angela would choose a Black man, to be the body he took on. Um, but again, hearing Yaya say that, and again, it's seen the show now through the lens of the last 6 months, and and the Breonna Taylor, like all of it, all of those tragedies have such a different impact on watching the show. But I'll say I'm sure for Yaya, it was that the whole time he was making it, because like he said, he comes from a family of women, and it just took on a whole new level of resonance hearing him speak about the love and admiration and everything that a Black woman deserves to receive. Um, you know, was so poignant.
Yeah. And in that episode, he creates Europa, which I'm assuming is primarily visual effects. What was it like creating that literally completely from scratch?
Um, it was tricky,
Mhm.
but it was again really fun. The One thing I loved about our visual effects designer was he was a real. It was all based in reality and in science, so it wasn't just like make up anything you want. It was like what could or would happen. Um, and we had the reference of the castle, that
Mhm.
was an actual location we filmed in Wales. So knowing that that would be, and we had a lake, that we filmed for real in Georgia. So we knew that the creation had to lead to those very specific actual locations.
And the manor house in Wales, that all pops up in a couple episodes. How did you all film that? Were you going back and forth? Was it filmed in one chunk or
Yeah, we block shot it. So after the pilot, um, we we found that location, and Damon wrote all the scenes for all the episodes that would go there. So that was, part of the challenge at the beginning of production for the series was we started in Wales, set up the crew to go there, crew and cast, and then went to Atlanta, got that location going for episode 2. So we had 2 full units going at the same time for 3 months or so, um, which was extremely exhausting. and But so we got the unit going, and then I went and shot my scenes. Stephen Williams did his scenes, and then Andre Perec did his. And for the people that couldn't, the directors that couldn't make it, as producing directors, Stephen and I split that work up.
wow. And the scenes in Vietnam, I love the world that you guys have built there with all of the graffiti of Dr. Manhattan and the costumes and everything. Where were those scenes shot?
Griffin, Georgia.
Wow.
It's amazing. Yeah, little small town, and same town where Rectify was set.
It's incredible. Was it difficult or was it more of a fun challenge to shoot all of those bar scenes without showing his face? Because you do create a really nice intimacy between the two of them and you're really just seeing like his hands or the back of his head.
It was extremely difficult, I'd say, and a fun challenge, therefore. But I said of all the things I had to do on Watchmen as a whole, that that 25 pages was probably the hardest. And I felt like when Damon sent that script in, I just felt like it was the ultimate director's challenge. Like, here, 25 pages, 2 people at a table, don't show one of their face and make it interesting. um, and some curse words went off in my head. But then, it was an immense challenge because I like to keep things visually very interesting, and I put that burden on myself, and I really approached it almost mathematically of where I want to be when in the dialogue, and which side do I want to be on, how close do I want to be on, all those things.
And the Adrian Veidt scenes, just as a whole, they're so different. They have this kind of like absurdist tone away from like the real action. What was it like switching to that mode?
It's the same of going from any scene to any scene. It's like, the tone, I had to just be true to that scene. And part of what made it so wacky was the choices that Jeremy Irons was making. I mean, of course, everything around him, but and with his performance, it was just really dialing it. Like, um, can we go that crazy? Let's have a range to play with. But again, it's the beauty of seeing an actor tap into a character and just see where they take it, where it grows to. And he was playing a man who was already psychotic. We want to, whether or not he knew it, or of course he didn't know it, but that when he lands in Europa, he is losing his mind.
Yeah, and he's so perfect in that role. Like, I know it's not revealed at first who he is, but if you've read the novel, it's kind of who else could it be?
Right, right. He's so good with
Yeah.
him.
One of the other like kind of diversions in the show is the American hero story,
Hmm.
which has a very like sensationalized violence, is almost like a different color palette. And I was wondering, what were your inspirations for that, and any like kind of references you had for filming that?
I mean, the main inspiration, first and foremost, was this is what we've decided to not have our Watchmen be. It's not going to be comic book colors or melodramatic. Ours is going to be very grounded in reality, as crazy as things may be. Um, and yeah, I think for the action, I definitely looked at the Kill Bills. Um, I think what was also fun is that it could be with the kind of more literal nod to the comic, or, especially with like what Stephen Williams did in episode 6. A lot of the framing was very comic book panel, extreme close up, sharp in focus while the background was also in focus. Um, yeah, that would, I'd say, was the
Yeah.
main references.
The name of the show, I'm assuming, was intended to be a play on American Crime Story, American Horror Story,
Yeah.
the Ryan Murphy series. Was the casting of Cheyenne Jackson a nod to that, or just a happy coincidence?
I think a happy coincidence.
That's
Yeah.
fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah. He was amazing.
he's great.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the music a little bit. There's not very many um, songs in it that aren't part of the Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross score. How much of that score did you have when you were working on it, if any?
Not, I remember during the pilot, Damon and I were on location. I think we were filming the scene where Judd runs over the tire shredder, and Damon just said, "Hey, listen to this." And Trent and Atticus had sent some just first ideas, and I know I heard it then, but I was so like in production craze that I didn't digest it. But I definitely was like, cool, let me go back to framing. Um, but they gave us a lot of material to use in the scoring of the first cut of the pilot. So that's when I saw, I think I just like my jaw hit the floor when I saw the scene with the boy after the same night of Tulsa 21, when the little boy finds the dead, not, sorry, when the boy finds the baby in the field, and the editor had put this track on, and it was so perfect. And, I just was thrilled. And similarly, the music that plays over Angela as she's going from Cal to the site of the tree.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just, it just like resonated exactly tonally in what you wanted to be feeling then. And those were all just first passes, I believe, of score.
Wow. Yeah, they're incredible. I was listening to a lot of it, while I was preparing for this, and it's
Oh, yeah.
it's great because it feels so of that world, and then it's also this amazing piece of music on its own. One of the songs that's not part of theirs is Eggman by the Beastie Boys. Was that a little Easter egg for us, or?
That sure, but I'll say, all the music, Damon is just a master of music choices that I really need to give him credit for
Okay.
all the, and the team, but yeah, that was amazing.
Yeah, and I know I've seen some articles that call you the queen of the Easter eggs. Was that one of my favorites is the anatomy of a squid poster in the back of the classroom, and then there's the egg smiley face that Angela makes in the bowl. Were those how did you plan those? Because that seems like so much more extra thought on top of everything else you're already doing.
Well, the poster, that's a gift of a great production designer, and that what would be in the classroom,
Mhm.
is like, what's the world we live in? And so that was totally, and Mark Worthington did the pilot. So it was either Mark or his set dresser that, to be very honest, I came to the classroom. I was like, that's amazing. It was a total gift. And there's nothing I love more than showing up at set to those kind of gifts. And, from the beginning of pre-production, we said, look for opportunities as much as you can for everyone. And then in the script, it was scripted um, that she would crack the eggs in such a way that made a smiley face, but I took it to another place of like lining up the eyes and the whisk so it looked like an owl. That was what
Yes.
I just was like, that would be fun.
Hmm.
And then I asked for the little blood splatter in one of the yolks, which can really happen.
Yeah.
I was like, why not? But so it's that so it's really just like, does take planning to say, I made, like, in general, I wanted everything to be circles. Just the circle was a theme, whether for clocks or Manhattan. So everything, just already had kind of a circular approach. But I specifically asked for the glass bowls, also because, you know, in order to have time to crack that many eggs to make a smiley face, it was going to get boring. So I had to figure out a cool way to, like, shoot many different angles so that we could cut it into a snazzy little sequence.
Do you have a favorite little piece of Watchmen, like a visual Watchmen cue that you snuck in?
Um, I love that people got the owl from the eggs. There was one the other day that I'd forgotten about. I was like, oh, that's a good one. And now I'm forgetting. Um, uh, I don't know. Do you?
When I think of them, I think of the blood and the egg because that's just like that extra little push to
Mhm.
reference back that I love.
Mhm.
Um, and going back to the original Watchmen, Dave Gibbons and Alan Moore. Dave Gibbons was the original illustrator, and Alan Moore the original author. Alan Moore is a notorious curmudgeon of the comic book world, so his approval, I'm sure, was just never on the table. But Dave Gibbons came out and said the fact that you all have found a way to bring Watchmen into that area and do it with something that he considers exciting, entertaining, and absolutely worthwhile in the subject matter, I think that's great. What was that like to get that approval from him?
It was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Just really, really validating. And he came even to Comic Con when we premiered there.
Mm-hmm.
And, just really, it is, you're taking somebody else's creation and you want to pay them all the respect they deserve and ideally have their blessing. And that, Damon received that blessing in advance, but also then to live up to, like, a happy reaction is like
Yeah,
the ultimate goal.
it's amazing. And then you've been so generous with your time. So just for my last question, there's been so many stories that have come out, especially this year, like the Georgia sheriff with his KKK uniform in his home, the mask, Jeff Bezos is building a giant 10,000 year clock. What is Watchmen trying to say about our world, and what does it mean that our present keeps echoing it?
That's a heavy last
And
question.
heavy.
um, well, what is it trying to say? Like, honestly, I don't want to answer that because that's really for the audience um, to answer for themselves. You know, that's what the conversations I want people to be having. Um, the ways in which reality is turning out to be stranger than fiction right now is disconcerting and uncanny. And that's like it's entirely has nothing to do with what went into making it. It's like that's just like,
Mhm.
you know, the baby has gone out into the world and is having this crazy life, and it's trippy, to be honest, to see that, you know. But it's nothing I like at all take credit for because, you know, we just made the best show we could make with as much heart and you know, with the intention of, you know, trying to tell some stories that haven't gotten to be told, and that they're rippling on in this way is pretty surreal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully it doesn't continue to echo too much.
Okay.
Hopefully we go back to some kind of normalcy. I'm not optimistic though.
That I said to Damon the first week of the pandemic, um, I said to him, "We're living in all three of your shows, and I don't like it. You
No,
know, I want it on my TV screen. I don't want it
no.
in our everyday lives."
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's been
Yeah.
such a pleasure to be able to talk about this show with you.
My pleasure. Thank you. You're great questions.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right.
All right. Take good care.
Bye.